I have this clip of Peter Thiel from 1996 before he struck it lucky with, knowing the right software engineer and PayPal. But he's talking about this. He has this book out called The Diversity Myth. And he's like, what, grapes are racist now? And just look at the way he talks about this issue of, people, like the IMer said, just pesticides dumped on them, just awful, and murder on top of just the mass sort of like poisoning. Just terrible stuff. But yeah, play this Thiel clip because I think it sets up the tone for the rest of the fun half here.
Well, the question then becomes, well, what are these things really about? What is multiculturalism really about? And I will suggest to you that the single most important theme that runs through much that goes under the rubric of multicultural is that it is anti-Western. It is not non-Western. It is still focused very much on our own society, but it is primarily a vehicle for denouncing it. At Stanford University, which is the one I'm the most familiar with, but I think is certainly no exception to the rule, the debate over multiculturalism in the late 80s started with a protest. The protest was against Western culture. The notorious chant was, hey, hey, ho, ho, Western culture's gotta go. It was not a demand for inclusion, it was a demand for exclusion. Now, why does Western culture have to go? What is the problem with multiculturalism? And what problem does it have? The basic problem, the basic claim is the West is uniquely bad because it is racist, it is sexist, it is oppressive in a variety of other ways. And not only does it have all these problems, but it has them in a way that is far worse than other societies. That's where I think things get very, very problematic. The multicultural educator at Stanford University liked to go around saying, I started looking for racism everywhere, and I started finding racism everywhere. And indeed, he did. If you start looking for anything everywhere, you will start finding it everywhere. If you are a feminist, and if you believe that everything that is longer than it is wide is a symbol of male oppression, then you will start finding sexism everywhere. If you want to find baseball everywhere, you can find baseball everywhere. And similarly, he could find racism everywhere. Let me just give you a couple of examples of how this process played out.
Pause it for 1 second.
There was an ongoing debate over.
It's just interesting. Like, yes, if you want to find sexism everywhere in our society, you can find it. And baseball everywhere in our society, you can find. You know what?
Not really.
You can't find baseball.
I think he just made a good point about sexism, but not so much about baseball.
No, me.
He is striking out.
Do you encounter baseball all the time in your world?
There's actually a game happening in my room right now. I don't know if you guys know.
See? I mean,
It's a figment of my imagination, but because I'm a sociopath, Peter Thiel.
I think he was actually just inadvertently made a very good point that there actually are some things that you can look for everywhere and not find it everywhere. But wait, is there more of it? Yeah, keep playing.
Yeah, he specifically talks about the grapes here.
As a symbol of male oppression, then you will start finding sexism everywhere. If you want to find baseball everywhere, you can find baseball everywhere. And similarly, he could find racism everywhere. Let me just give you a couple of examples of how this process played out. There was an ongoing debate over boycotting table grapes. The fact that table grapes were served in student residences was viewed as evidence of racism. Why? Well, because most of the grape pickers in California happened to be Latino farm workers, and they were exposed to dangerous pesticides, supposedly. Now, the fact that a grape boycott would get rid of their jobs was sort of irrelevant because, again, many of these things involve more moral posturing than real substantive concerns over these issues. There was...
Okay, and I just want to be clear. When was that from?
1996.
So in other words, a lot of this stuff is just virtue signaling, and it is absurd, and they're freely agreeing to be having pesticides poured on their head. And you've got people who are going around on college campuses looking for racism everywhere they find it, and this and that. That was 25 years ago. There is nothing new. When we hear this shit, it is nothing new. This is exactly what Corey Robin talked about with the reactionary mind. The reactionary mind of conservatives will keep bringing up these dynamics as if they are like the hip, cool, new, edgy. We've found it. I'm saying the stuff that nobody wants to talk about anytime, which is that, like, if you look for racism everywhere, you'll find it. And what's going on here is excess. And this is excess. And the diversity is problematic. And people are virtue signaling. And they just... keep repackaging the same, essentially, status quo maintenance of the power dynamics in our society. And every time they just sort of like update the fashion in which it's going to be presented. It's not whatever he was referring to at a time. It's not politically correct anymore. It's now, woke culture, cancel culture. I mean, it's all the same stuff. They just regurgitate it and just rebrand this shit over and over again.
Except what's so interesting is with it, like, he's talking about systemic issues. There's no systemic racism. There's no systemic sexism. There's no systemic baseballism or whatever the hell it is. This is where his current success is making sure that belief is ingrained in the modern day system so that it's able in a society in which I'm hoping people are more aware of systemic issues than they were, say, 30 years ago, maybe not really sure. He is making sure that it's not just prevented, but it's diverted, that whatever education could potentially happen, be it in schools on a legislative level or obviously through his technological, investment, making sure that they can divert the attention back to these culture wars through a systemic way. So he's actually giving it away right there.
Yeah, he's obscuring it. And in fact, we brought this up at the beginning of the show when we were talking about Pete Buttigieg's comment on Moses building the
low tunnels,
low bridges, overpasses, to keep inner city buses from going out to Jones Beach. I mean, that's the same thing, and trying to obscure the actual history and the reality at any given moment.
And Thiel and the type of lawyers he knows and the finance people he came up with, they like that those people were poisoned by those sorts of pesticides. They're fine with it. They want to obscure it. And this is 10 years after. You look at the Wrath of Grapes speech by Cesar Chavez. You read that, and I dare you to try to say that Peter Thiel has at all conveyed the message of what that struggle was about.
Yeah.
Table grapes.
How could these be racist?
How could these be racist?
How could cotton be racist?
I mean, if you want to find, he really should have worked out something else. If you want to find baseball everywhere, you'll find it everywhere, except for when you're watching like a TV and see football.
Ted Lasso.
It's unbelievable.
And not to mention that by the way, as I apologize, I don't remember the name of the IMer, but that still occurs in through loopholes now, loopholes that Peter Thiel tries to, lobbies for in the law so that pesticides are still sprayed, maybe not in the same exact way, but they're still sprayed and they're still affecting farm workers who are not making 20 cents an hour now, a little bit more, and have a few more rights. But this is again in California. This is in California. So imagine, what's happening just south of the border or in Iowa where perhaps the laws aren't as strong.